Okay, so I want to finish up Tal today, and as we started last week, and then I want to do Ya Eli V'Go Ali, which is the piyut that I think said in most shuls, all shuls, whatever, before Musaf, right before Ashrei. That's our goal for today, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so. Last week we introduced Tal, the difference between Tal and Geshem, and we like Tal better. Tal is all positive. Geshem we know is not always positive. It can rain too hard, not rain enough. We saw the story with Choni Hamagal, and we showed all the places in the Torah where Tal is mentioned, right, by the man and by Moshe Rabbeinu comparing the Torah. It should flow like the Tal, and we said Geshem can be harsh, and that can represent a Torah scholar who an improper Torah scholar. We know that we have great geniuses sometimes in Torah, great scholars whose morals and other aspects of their life don't live up to their Torah values, and that's common. I don't common. It's a occupational hazard, right? We discussed the. I'm thinking next week to do Birchas Koni, which we do on which I didn't do when Shmon Esrei, which I did on Yontiv, but in the first bracha, Birchas Koni, Mivarach Hashem Yishmerecha. So the Netziv mentions this very true and powerful idea that we ask God to bless us and to guard us. Yivarach Hashem Yishmerecha. We get blessing, but blessings can turn into a curse. And he says everybody in their own field. So for the business person, so we know what's the blessing to make a lot of money. That right, Milton Friedman's famous line: "The business of business is business." Right, the purpose of going into business is to make money. You can argue that that's a whole debate whether he's correct or not. In other words, what's the goal of business? It means okay, then when you make money, what do you do with your money? But But if that's all you have, making money, so money can corrupt you. We all know that, make you arrogant. We all know people who made a lot of money and it was very bad for them and very bad for everybody else. Sometimes it's fantastic, they make a lot of money because they're very philanthropic. And sometimes it's fantastic and terrible at the same time. The same person does great things with the money and terrible things. No, no. And if you're a Torah scholar, so the blessing is that you should be successful in your learning. And what do you have to be guarded about? Guard against arrogance and looking down on people. We all know that. And people are bright and brilliant, and they often have no patience for other people. No patience for other people is half a problem, but sometimes they totally mistreat other people, and so that is a problem. That's a problem. So that's what the Netziv said, that our Torah learning shouldn't corrupt us, and we see unfortunately, how true that might be. Anyway, so that's what the Gemara in Tanya we did last week says about rain. That rain can be something very negative, and unlike Tal, which is always very beautiful and positive. And that's why we said I suggested perhaps when we say Tfilat Geshem, we always refer to the Geshem to historical events. Avram, Moshe, Aaron, right? We refer to events when water was something very positive. By Tal, we don't refer to events. We just refer to Tal as dew itself because dew is always positive. We just refer to rain in the abstract. So rain wouldn't always be something positive. Okay, so we almost finished and I quickly ran through the second last paragraph. We'll pick up a couple themes, do the last paragraph, then hopefully do sort of introductory paragraphs quickly, and then we'll move to Eli. So let me share my screen. And where is my share screen here? There we go. I don't know I don't know if is your Zoom screen look any different than it used to? I'm just curious if it's only me or it's everybody. Anybody? My Zoom screen looks a little bit different than it
Oh,
was.
it's fine.
Okay, it's fine. It's just
Same as always.
I'm sorry.
Same as always. Same.
Okay. So I'll have to ask one of my kids to try to figure it out. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes, Marty. Yes.
Good one. I remember you mentioned this last week. How old is Tao?
How old is Tal? I'm not sure. When we get to Ya Eli, we'll see that's 200 to 300 years old. Tal, I don't know exactly how old. It's probably as old as Rabbi Lezer HaKalir, because that's who we're pretty sure composed it. The problem is we don't know exactly when Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir lived, but let's assume he lived in the 7th century, 8th and 9th century. We're not 100% sure when he lived. I forget already. I think the scholars have narrowed it down a little more. There used to be more uncertainty, but in some of his piyutim, he refers to sort of, I think in one of the piyutim, he refers to how many years since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. I forget what it is though. If it's and Rav Soloveitchik picks up on that I mentioned last week that there were people who used to Tosfot has an opinion, the Balei Tosfot, that he was a Tana. He was one of the Tanaim, one of the rabbis of the Mishnah. But I think today we assume that opinion is not correct. And you should know, Rabbi Eliezer Kalir was. I remember Dr. Lakshin, who is going to be speaking at next week I think on Monday, giving our opening shir. Actually, think of after the Yom Iyun. So Dr. Lakshin, who's knows a lot about piyutim. So I remember he gave in Toronto years ago at a live talk about the negativity towards Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir. Like everything, everybody new introduces new genres, so they become accepted. The Rambam, you know how much controversy? We all know how much controversy were at the Rambam. So the Ibn Ezra especially very much did not like Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir. I mean, didn't like him. I don't mean personally. He thought his poetry was ridiculous, and he made up words, and it's too hard. It is hard. You don't know what he's talking about, and it's illusion. So there were a lot of negative reactions to Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir, and there's poetry, but the Jewish people voted with their feet, and Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir is probably our most important and famous paitan. There are other ones, Yanai, and all these other paitans who are less famous and not well known. But when you go through Slichot, you'll see. I mean, you'll see if you look, and different people composed them, and and the Ashkenazi Slichot are very different. So if this is talk comes from Rabbi Eliezer Kalir, so I'm gonna, for argument's sake, we're gonna say it's 1,500 years old. And now, when did it get put in the Siddur? That I don't know for sure. And I didn't see, as I mentioned last week, very few of the Siddurim actually comment on it, which leads me to believe it's a much later addition to the Siddur. And I really should look it up more. I'm sorry. Exactly when. Yeah, more.
ChatGPT says it was incorporated in the Siddur in the High Middle Ages, which is around 1,000.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, ChatGPT, and like most of these things, it takes time. Like today, everything is instantaneous. Like Kabbalah Shabbos, right? So as late as the 19th century, there were even today, many of the Sephardic communities do not say all of Kabbalah Shabbat. The Syrians, a lot of them don't say Kabbalah Shabbos, so they say a very small portion of it. But it took hundreds of years for Kabbalah Shabbos. I mean, amazing that somebody in the 16th century can write a piyut l'chadoti. Probably the most famous piyut of any piyut is l'chadoti, and there are 500 tunes or 5,000 tunes to l'chadoti, and pretty much every community in the world, even those that don't say all of Kabbalah Shabbos, also have parts of l'chadoti. So things, how things progress and when they're accepted. And we mentioned that embroiders, they were one of the last communities. Germany was one of the last places to accept Kabbalah Shabbos. And I mentioned that's the reason you go to broiders today, they do Kabbalah Shabbos responsively, meaning you only say half of Kabbalah Shabbos. The Chazan says verse 1, you say verse 2. He says verse 3, and you say verse 4. And that's how they do Kabbalah Shabbos very quickly. And I mentioned when I was there, I asked, well, where does this custom come from? So he said, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch did not really want to add Kabbalah Shabbos to the davening. That's a Jewish people. It's new. Chadash Asher Min Torah. Not that Hirsch believed in that, obviously, but we're not going to introduce new prayer services. Or whoever heard of such a thing? So he said, okay, you want to say Tehillim. All right, so we say Tehillim. You can say Tehillim. I'll answer Tehillim. We'll do a little bit back. But it is interesting. I don't know the history of when this came in. And obviously, once you have a printing press, things become much more standardized. Matter of fact, in a totally different realm, we know that's probably why Daf Yomi started only in 1923, because it was I saw an article about this. Somebody writing that the Vilna Shas, the Shas that everybody uses today, the standard Shas, was only printed between, I think, 1880 and 1883 in Vilna, the Rom brothers in Vilna. That's why we call it the Vilna Shas. And before that, they had different versions. So if you want to have Daf Yomi, everybody better be on the same page of the Gemara. So anyways, these are interesting questions. Okay, but let's get to the essence of Tal, and let's go and finish at a couple things in the fifth. Remember, it's right, it's an alphabetical acrostic backwards, Tain Shin, right? Geshem is forwards, Aleph Beit, this is Tafshin. So I just want to point out, this is where we got up to like the fifth and sixth paragraphs. So fifth we sort of in the middle of last week. Tal b'sova malei asamenu, that the tal should satisfy us, right? The sova, satisfaction. Haka'ek, now, we mentioned last week. Now, we don't want to wait. Dod. Dod means, I think what's a dod in modern Hebrew, dod is an uncle, no? But it really means a friend. Kol dodito fake, my beloved, right? That's Rav Soloveitchik's famous piece, sort of Zionist manifesto. And so Dod, that God is our friend in many ways. We have different relationships to God. God is Avinu and Malkeinu. God is our Father and our King. And of course, those are in tension with each other, because the relationship to a father is very different to relationship to a king. And only with God can you love God and be in fear of God. There's a mitzvah to Abat Hashem, to love God, and there's a mitzvah to fear God. And we don't have that anywhere else. We mentioned many times, parents, you have a mitzvah to fear or to be not to love, because love is equality, awe is not equality. So we have this contradictory relationship with God. Both have to be true. At different times, maybe at the same time, that might be harder. At different times, we have different relationships. So here we emphasize our relationship that God is our friend in a sense. God have the heavens work properly, so it gives rain. Ma'amid shamenu, like to establish, to set up, to stand up, and it means to set. A davar mamid in hilchot kashrut, something that allows the product to come together, congeal, let's say. And by the way, in halacha, again, totally different context, but the same idea, that in halacha, a davar hamamid, what we call, is eno batel. If I have to think, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but something that keeps the product together. Without it, it's sort of the product wouldn't, the food wouldn't be the food that it is, even though it's 1 in 1,000. Let's say a little bit of chametz, but it's a davar hamamid. I don't know, whatever. So then it doesn't get nullified, no matter how much kosher. Nullification means it's not important. It's not that 60-1 is a rule. It's the assumption is really the halach is you give it to a non-Jew to taste the food, and if he can't taste the non-kosher aspect, it's kosher. We don't, whether it's 40-1 or 80, and it would be kosher. If it's 80-1 and he can't taste it, it's not kosher. If we don't know, so we assume 60-1 in a liquid nullifies it, but that's not always true. There are exceptions to the rule. But anyway, so mamid is to make it firm and established, and that's the. So I think it's the same idea here. Mamid shemenu, God make the heavens, work as they should at the proper time, keeps the whole universe right. It's davar mamid for the whole world. Without rain, the whole world falls apart. Famine. So it's mamid shemenu. Gan Rava Shimenu Katal, that it should be like a luscious garden. It should give great fragrance. And okay, if you want to just mute yourself, if you don't mind, it's hard for me when I'm sharing my screen. Can't really mute people. Okay, and it's also a metaphor that the Jewish people should be like a watered garden, right? We know trees. The Torah tells us, Ki Adam eitz hasadeh, man is like a tree, and a tree has roots and branches and leaves and all kinds of different things, right? And you have each part of the Jewish people sort of represents a different part of the tree. So we're like, the Jewish people should be like a garden that gives off so much bounty to the rest of the world. Okay, let's do the sixth and last paragraph. And of course, we're going to have two baits and two aleph because there are 24 letters in there are 22 letters in the alphabet. And if you do 6 stanzas of 4, you got 24 letters. We have that in a lot of our PU team, right? They're not going to make the last one only 2 lines. So they have to increase the letters. So aleph bait, the first 2 letters of the alphabet get an extra line. Tal bo tivarach mazon. The tal should bless our food, right? B'mashmenu al yehi razon. Mashmenu, how they translated our flocks. That's interesting, right? Sometimes they translate in our storehouses. Al yehi razon. There shouldn't be lean like the cows in Paro's dream, right? They should be full. Ayuma asher hisata kason. The nation that you led like sheep. Ana tafek la ratzon. God, give them their desire. Tafek to bring forth, right? Nafik is to come out, even in Aramaic, to bring forth. Tafik la ratzon. The tal should, and it bring forth the produce of the land, and it should fulfill the desires of the Jewish people. So there are 2 ways, right? So you notice I translated just now, Ayuma Asher said to son, that we're referring to God. God led the Jewish people like a farmer leads his flock. Like he was our shepherd, and we are the sheep that follow him, right? We were like the sheep that he led, and that's how they translated. You lead like sheep. Other people translated, we follow God like sheep. Yeah. The RCA Siddur, which nobody uses. I don't think anybody ever used. I don't think it was printed too late, as Yosef Lindell gave in his series. Came out a few years ago, the Rabbinical Council of America Siddur. I don't know if any shuls that really have adopted it. But be that as it may, so they translated as not God leading us, like a shepherd leads a sheep. Well, we follow God. Then there was the emphasis on how the Jewish people, like sheep, follow the leader. Are we referring to the leader or the sheep? We're the sheep, and God is the leader. And of course, both are true. God protects us like sheep, or like the care, And of course, the idea that sheep one by one, we have that idea on Rosh Hashanah, Kivakar Roa Edro, Mavir Sono Tachat Shifto, right? One by one, Kain Tavir Betispor, you count every single one going through, and that's how God. We'll see that in Ya'eli, that God judges everybody individually, but he does that at the same time, right? So that's the idea that the shepherd cares about every sheep. So that's and the tal should fulfill all our desires, and that's how the piyut ends. Okay, and then we say shatu Hashem kinu mashi v'ruach u'morid hatal, which is interesting because we say that when Talmud Nusach Ashkenaz doesn't say that, right? We don't say morid hatal all year. Nobody says mashi v'ruach u'morid hatal, right? The Sephardim just say morid hatal. No. In the summer you say morid hatal. You don't say mashi v'ruach morid hatal, do you? You do, Susan?
My Rabbi, my Hungarian Rabbi that I grew up with, always said all year long, for that season, Masha Baruch, not just Morital. And I've adopted that in his memory.
Very nice. I've never heard that in a shul. Have you ever seen that in a shul where the
Hungarian? I heard somebody else do it once.
Okay. I can't say definitely the Hungarian nusach so often, right? Because if you say Mashi Baruch Morid Hageshem, you have to, in theory, repeat the Hoshmon Esrei. So, but Mashi Baruch you're allowed to say. But my understanding, and I think that's the standard understanding, is because the Ruach is all year, wind is all year. But in other words, you're allowed to say it, but you shouldn't really say it. In other words, we want to emphasize it only in the winter. So that's why I'm assuming that's why, except for now the Hungarian minhag, nobody says Mashi Baruch. They say where it does. It's interesting. We always know there are always different beautiful customs of the Jewish people, and everybody should follow their own customs. So, and that's what we say, which would make sense. You should always say. In other words, in the bracha of Tal, we say Shatash Mashi Baruch. You bring the winds, umorid hatal. So in the winter we say Mashi Baruch umorid hagashem. Or Gashem, some say, but okay, Morid Gashem. And in the summer, Mashi Baruch Morid Hatal actually makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of logic, but that's not the standard practice of the Jewish people. And then we end the same, interestingly enough. And based on what I said, I guess I don't understand this right now. I'm just thinking now, right? I hadn't thought of it before, right? We understand by rain why we say lebracha v'lo leklala lechayim v'lo lemavet lesova v'lo lerazon, right? That's how we end. That the rain should be for a blessing and not a curse. That's we said it can be a curse. It should be for life. Unfortunately, people, hurricanes, tsunamis, all these terrible things with water. The sova should fill it to low the razon if there's not enough rain. So that I understand by Geshem, but I don't really understand, and I don't have an answer after why we say this by Tal, because I just gave you a whole speech this week and last week that Tal is all positive. That's the difference between Tal and Geshem. If you look at all our sources, that's clear what they say. So it could be we just say because we say it by Geshem, we say it too, even though it's really true. But I don't really, I don't know. I'm wondering if you only say because of Geshem. If anybody has any ideas, you can let me know. But because you would think, theoretically, we don't have to add these by Tal. You have to add it by Geshem, the bracha of Lolacha. But that's what we do. Then we add it, and then we, Mechal Chaim Meches, and then etc. Okay, and except we mentioned last week in Israel, they do it, before Musaf. Okay, so let's quickly go through the introduction before we get to this piyut. So the way the Chazan doesn't do it, this is not said in Israel. That's why these two paragraphs are not said in Israel, because in Israel they don't do tefillah tel the way we do. We discussed last week. They only they say it before the Amidah, and they only say that piyut. As I say, I like this our custom much better. We discussed it last week because I'm used to it, but it also, it makes it more dramatic than just a quick thing you're saying before. Okay, so and we say the first one before the bracha of Magen Abraham, and the second one after the bracha of Magen Abraham. In other words, we say this in Avot, the first one in the bracha that Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and we say this in the bracha of Purot, the bracha of the strength of God, Mechayei HaMeitim. So. Okay, so let's go through this. And here also, there are 5 lines each instead of 4. The piyut is 4 times 6. This is 5 times 2. And of course, they rhyme. Chidot, lachdot, which means joy and happiness. Lachdot, toladot, generation, but it's obviously rhyming. And kisufim, nichsafim, mosifim, musafim, right? We add and we say musaf, sifim, the little cracklets, whatever. Okay, so b'da'ato, with the knowledge of God, abiyah chidot. The word abiyah means you can see the English, of course, here. I will speak chidot. So it's interesting that they translate that as rhymes. The Siddur Ma'asad basically translated as mysteries. That's how our school translated Chidah. In modern Hebrew, I think a Chidah is a riddle. No, correct me if I'm wrong. But a Chidah means a riddle, something hidden a little bit. So our school translated, I will express the mysteries, right? I guess the mystery, how the world, the nature of Bia Chidot, or the RCA translates it, which I guess makes it's easier to understand what it means as my inner thoughts. To God I reveal, or God knows my inner thoughts. Here they translate as him. Abiyah, I will speak. Ba'amzu bezu betal lachdot. That the people, the tal should bring the nation together. Let's say, so bring joy to this people would do. Okay. Ba'am zu bezu, meaning one person to another. Batal, with tal lachdot, we should have joy. We should have joy and happiness. And the way I understand it is that when the economy is doing well, people are happy. They get along. When the economy is not doing well, when there's oil, the price of oil goes up 50%. So I don't have to tell you all the tension it creates and all the negativity, and people don't like this, and why you're dragging us into a war, and why you're doing this. Because people, and how everything's too expensive. Society doesn't function well when lots of people can't afford basics of life. And we see that today. That's a big crisis. It's interesting. I'll just mention for a minute that did anybody see They published this week the findings of the 2026 survey on happiness. I find the whole concept amazing. They study happiness. I don't exactly know how they do that. I mean, you can know, but they do research, and so they have the country. So every year, the top happy countries in the world are always like in one of these orders, always Finland, Norway. What's up? What else is there? Finland, Norway. What else is up? Denmark. All the
Sweden,
Nordic countries, right,
Sweden,
are always the happiest in the world. Amazing.
Sweden.
Sweden, right, right, correct. They're always like the top five. This year, those were four of the five, and Costa Rica made the top five. That was it this year. And the why I saw because in the Globe and Mail in Toronto, the paper, the national paper of Canada, so it said that Canada dropped from 11th place or something to 26th place, a huge drop to 26th place. And then they had another analysis of people under 25. In other words, the youth. So Canada's in 71st place. So that's like awful. We're like a third world country in happiness. Canada is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It's one of the best places to live. Forget that anti-Semitism. I know you read a lot about anti-Semitism, shooting. It's a problem everywhere. And yes, it's a problem here too, of course. But for most people, and even for Jews, Canada is a wonderful place to live. So that the people are enjoying for 71st. So I was reading all the comments, the analysis. Well, you know what? People can't afford houses anymore. The housing went through. Young people can't get jobs, AI. And when young people are dissatisfied, it's really, it's a problem. And I think there's a lot of, I'm not a psychologist, but obviously I don't think you need to be one to understand how true that is. So that was just fascinating that it dropped. What's, of course, amazingly fascinating, of course, is what place did Israel come in?
9.
Eighth.
9.
I thought they came in eighth, which is,
I thought 9. I thought
and
9.
some people comment on they got missiles. That's unbelievable. And I'll say in 1 second, I'm going to discuss this in a minute or more. And the youth under 25, Israel came in third place in the world. In other words, the young people in Israel are the third happiest as a whole, which is, it's amazing, amazing. And I think part of it is meaning. I'll say something, of course, I'm teaching from chat now. I'm recording from chat, obviously. And so at the end of the year, we do, it's a final project I make. I think it's my grade 12 class. They have to interview somebody about halakha in the modern world. That's my final product. They do the interview on Zoom. I came up with this project when we were all stuck in Zoom. And it's really very interesting. So this week we had our first one. So they interviewed Moshe Capel, if you know him, as he introduced himself. Half the country loves me, half the country hates me. He's the head of the think tank Kohelet, which was the one pushing judicial reform. So I met him years ago. He's brilliant. He was a math professor in computers at Bar Ilan. And most of the interview was not so much on his judicial stuff, but it was on, he has this site, Rav Dicta and AI and everything. And he was talking about the impact, what it's going to be. And he said, it's scary. Says millions of people are going to lose their jobs. He says in the Western world, when you meet people, what do most people do? Hello, how are you? Who are you? I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an investment banker. Most people within the first sentence tell you what they do, right? He said, they don't tell you, this is my wife and I got 4 kids and I got this and that. That's not how people talk. They often identify themselves with their work. But when AI can do your work better than you can, and that will happen soon, my wife tells me that her uncle, who's a surgeon, top surgeon, doesn't have to be, he is, of course, they don't allow this, but he doesn't have to be in the surgical room. He doesn't have to be there. When they do surgery, it's all done with machine. You can instruct the machine what to do. They put a camera in your body. They see you don't need surgeons anymore. It's a little scary. It's like you don't need a pilot to fly the airplane, but I don't think any of us would ever get on an airplane without a pilot. So it's the same type of thing. So he said when people lose meaning to life, like if their work is their meaning, they're in big trouble. So I think in Israel, whatever, there's a lot of meaning, not for everybody, whatever. So when you have meaning, you put up with a lot of hardship. But I just thought that was a fascinating comment. I know it's a little bit, I don't know that's what the author of the Tal was thinking about, but I think there is something to that idea that we're asking, Zubizu, when the people come together when the Tal is working well. It's very important, the economic growth. The Torah spends a lot of time on this. Okay, all right. Ba'am Zubital Lachdot. We will rejoice, the people. Tal ge utesha lachdot. Tal will bring dishaim, right? We don't say that bracha anymore. Dishaim, things that come, desha, tazria aretz desha, on the third day of creation, growth from the land will rejoice. The Tal should bring the land flourishing. And it's very fascinating. I don't know how many people have studied, or last time you looked at the sixth parak in Masechet Brachot. So Masechet Brachot, the first tractate of the Talmud. So really, it talks about Brachot, but not really till the sixth chapter. The first three, I mean, it's indirectly about Brachot. The first three chapters talk about Shema. It's not really brachot, they're brachot before Shema, but it talks about Meimatai according to Shema Ba'arvi. That's how it starts. When you say Shema, the first three chapters, law of Shema. Chapters 4 and 5 are the laws of Shmon Esrei. But it never tells us what the 18 brachot are. That's not in the Mishnah. We know Shmon Esrei are brachot, but it doesn't really talk about the brachot. It talks about how to say Shmon Esrei, law of Shmon Esrei. And in chapters 6, 7, and really 6 and 9, a chapter that actually talk about actual brachot, and the Ketzad Mevarkim al Peirot Ilan. I think that's how it starts, and it lists off all the brachot. Hamotzi, everything that grows from the ground, you make one bracha except for hamotzi. All fruit you make one bracha except for wine, and it lists off the brachot. And then it says on things that come around, you make bore minei dishaim. This one bore minei dishaim. We don't say that bracha. Dishaim on the Gemara Yerakot, whatever Yerakot mean in the Mishnah, it's say bore dishaim. So we don't have that bracha. What's fascinating, and I've never seen a good answer, the bore minei mizonot is never mentioned. There is no bracha in the sixth chapter for Borei Minei Mizunot. I don't know why, but it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. But Desha, things that grow from the ground, is mentioned. So that's just an interesting sort of tidbit. Desha, and that comes from creation. God created the Desha. So Talge Udisha Eha, the land itself will lachdot, will dance with joy, will have joy. Datsim means dance, or at least according to many people. Datsim is Datsim bitzilo, they dance in the shade of God. Tzel, right? A sukkah is known as the tzel. We sit in the sukkah tiel tzel. That's a pasuk in Yeshayahu. The sukkah will be a covering. It means a covering. It means also God's cloud, God's shade. We sit in the shade of God and we dance. Datsim bitzilo alachdot, ot yaldot tan lagain letoladot. Ot, it's a sign. Otorim mafdim, we know from Pesach. Yaldot, from the young sign or the youth. Lahagain, to protect the toldot, to protect the generation. You see in English, he has Abraham in the sort of square brackets. In other words, this is a reference. That's all the ot yaldot. Right, Magain Abraham. And this bracha is said, the next words we say are Baruch Hashem Magain Abraham. The way we say Tal, we say and Lagain the Todot, and then the Chazan says Baruch Hashem Magain Abraham. Abraham is the protector for his generation, the idea of skut avot, and the merit of our fathers. He's our teacher. We learn from him how to act, and he's our protector. And that's basically what we say, that Avram protects the future generations by modeling how do we live well. Ot yaldot tal, so that we're comparing Avram to Tal, the sweetness, the pleasantness, the way it helps things grow. He grew the Jewish nation. So Avram is kind of compared to Tal, lahagain, and he protects his children. I think it's a beautiful imagery and beautiful metaphor. Okay, that's the first paragraph. Then,
Hey, Kelman,
yes, Zev.
you talked about brokers. If you make a shahakal on wine, are you yotze?
Yes. Make a shackle on anything you're yotze. Absolutely, yes.
I thought it was a machlokes of the Gemara. It says it.
Not as far as I know. Maybe it's a machloket. I don't recall, but we paskin. Basically, the idea is when a food is special, you want to make a unique bracha to it. So you can make borei priyadama on bread. I mean, nobody does that because everybody knows hamotzi lechem minards. But that's what the Mishnah says. You can make borei priyadama, and we know when there's a fruit. If you're not sure if something's a fruit or a vegetable, right? So it's always better to make a borei priyadama because fruit grows from the ground, but vegetables don't grow in trees. So if you make borei priya eights on a cucumber, you didn't fulfill. You have to say the brach over. But if you make borei priyadama on an orange, that's fine. So shahakol you can make on wine. Of course, it's better not to. It's better. Shakol is one when they don't have any other breakfast. So it's interesting because to us this is important food: fish, meat, eggs. We make shako. They're bland foods. So you make shako. We don't have specific bracha. We have a specific bracha, wine and bread, of course. We know wine is the most important. We said that yesterday in Barking Nafshi, Yain Yisamech Levan. Wine sweetens us. Lechem is what gives us food. So lechem and yain have their own bracha. And then we make tree, fruit, vegetables. We make a mezonot also, but they could also make board priyatama. You're not supposed to, ideally, but yes, that works. So when you're in doubt, it's you make a bracha that will encompass things. Listen, Hilchah bracha I mentioned many times. I'm convinced if Chazal were alive today, Hilchah bracha would be totally changed. The main change would be that just because you eat bread, you wouldn't be exempt from all brachot, because in other words, it's not bread. The idea is when you have you go to Kiddush. I don't know. They serve you a knish. So what bracha do they make on a knish? The knish got rice, all this wheat stuff, all this oily whatever. What's it called? All the puff stuff. It's got a little bit of potato in the middle.
Morning. How are you?
I'm sorry. We make a borei minei mizrach. We don't make guys. The potato doesn't really count. That's a question. When you have cereal and milk, do you make one bracha or two brachot? So I had different. There was a point in my life I used to make two brachot. I used to make a mezonot on whatever, on Cheerios, and shakol on. I don't do that anymore. And different opinions. It's one food I'm eating, and I'm eating the milk is just to add a little bit of flavor to the cereal. So that's, you have halacha when you have an ikar and a tapel, something main and something less main, you make a bracha on the main thing. So the Shulchan Aruch says when you eat herring, salty herring, and you put a piece of bread under the herring to absorb the salt, you make a shahakol on the bread. Because you're eating herring, you're not really eating bread. Yeah, you're eating some bread to absorb the taste of the herring. So wheat today, so it used to be bread was the main foods. Everybody ate bread. So they made hamotzi. They ate it. It was a sandwich. We eat bread. We make hamotzi at the beginning of the meal. Then we don't touch the bread. That's like 1/10 of what we eat. It doesn't really fit. And then, what do you mean? You only have to say Birkat Hamazon if you eat bread? Whatever, but it's hard. And my son told me when he was in Gush, one of the reasons like Yoel Beinu, Rabbi Yoel Beinu, the Tanakh expert, is he follows this. He'll wash on the face on crackers, and he'll make Birkat Hamazon because that we eat totally differently. But anyways, okay. So, yeah. So if you make a shahakol. You do going on here. Yeah, you do fulfill your obligation on the wine. Okay, let's go back here. Back to here. So now we've said Magen Avraham, and then the Chazan says Atagibor la Hashem mekti mata Rav Loshia. God should revive the dead. The bracha, which we say 5 times in that bracha, and then we say this tohomot, the depths, tohom, hadom l'risiso kisufim, right? The depths, the things, things that grow are below the ground. So they're yearning for tal so they can grow, so they can come forth and grow. V'chol na'ot desha lo nichsapim is to yearn for something, right? The chol na'ot desha, all the grass, all the vegetation is lo nichsapim, is yearning for dew. It's like they're alive. We're picking the fields are alive, right? The hills are alive with the sound of music, right? I think that's a very good metaphor. Actually, that's right. Okay, tal zichro kavurot, right? Mosipim tal. Now here we mention tal zichro. We mention tal, right? The word zachor doesn't, in biblical Hebrew, zachor doesn't just mean to remember. It really means to mention. Zachor Yom HaShabbat Lekadsho we remember Shabbat, and the Ramban says that mitzvah to remember Shabbat you do on Tuesday. You don't have to remember something when you experience it. When you go to camp, you don't say, I remember camp. When camp is over, I remember what camp was like. Not when you're in camp. So on Shabbos, you don't remember Shabbos, you experience Shabbos. So the Ramban says, that's why we say, Hayom Yom Rishon B'Shabbat, Hayom Yom Sheni. When you make that statement, Hayom Yom Rishon B'Shabbat, you're fulfilling a biblical mitzvah of Zachor Yom HaShabbat Lekadsho. But that's remember. But the Gemara interprets the word Zachor, Zacharehu al Hayayin, mention it with wine, Kiddush. And we assume Kiddush is a biblical obligation. To make it on wine is a rabbinic obligation, the wine part, but that you have to sanctify, but you have to mention Shabbat. That's what Zichro, Zachor Desher Salach Amalek. You have to remember. When the word used Zachor, it doesn't just mean, you have to mention. It doesn't just mean to remember it. When you talk about it, we know you know things better when you speak it. If it's just in the mind, but everybody knows. If you read out loud, you remember better. Everybody knows. That's obvious, right? So the Torah doesn't want to remember because they know. Remember, it's easy to forget. When you speak it and you mention it, it's much more. So Tal Zikro, we mention Tal. That's the why it seems like you should mention Morid Tal. Givurot, Mosifim. We add in the bracha of Gvurot, of Atagibor, we add Tal, Morid. Some, if you're Hungarian, I guess, Mashiv Aruach or Morid Hatal. Chakuk Bigishat Musafim. We put it in, now we're starting, I think, the bracha of Tal. Chakuk, it's we make like a chok is a statue. You chisel in, you chakuk, you sharpen it, right? Lachok is to make it really like real. It's like in the body. We take a hammer and we took it in the stone. We make markers. That's permanent. That's what the Torah should be like inscribed on our hearts. Chakuk, Bigishat Musafim. So as we now Bigishat Musafim probably really means when the korban musaf, when you gisha lahagish, when you bring the musaf. Of course, in our context, it means the prayer of musaf, right? Gishat musafim. When we come forth to say musaf, tal lachayot bo nikuke seifim. Tal will lachayot will bring life to those nikuk in the holes beneath the earth. And this, I assume, is the reference to the Gemara we mentioned last week, that God will revive the dead. Tchias Hametim will come through Tal. And of course, that's where we say this. We say this word of Tal in the bracha of Gvurot, of strength. And what's God's great strength? Mechayei Hametim, right? And rain, the Gemara says we say rain there because even though we obviously view it very differently, rain, resurrection, it's all the same. For God, bring rain from the world. We obviously don't see it that way. But you have rain, and that's what the Gemara says. It's like the same power of God to bring rain to the world, that God, from the earth things fall. It's like man from heaven. But again, when you see something every day or every other day, and half the time you don't even want it to rain, so we don't see the power of God in rain. But that's what we're supposed to see. And the Talmud equates it to God's power in resurrection. And here we're using the same idea in slightly different context in by Tal lachayot. Tal can revive the dead, and that's what the Talmud says. God would use Tal to revive the dead. Okay, so that's bracha. I guess we're going to say it a week from Thursday, right? On Birkat Tal. So you got the paragraph about Avraham, in a sense, right before Magen Avraham. The paragraph about Gvurah, the strength of God, right before the bracha, right after Atagibor, Lashem. And then we add the piyut. The piyut, in a certain sense, the piyut is less important, right? It's these two things that are really part of the Shemon Esrei. But of course, in Israel, they only say the piyut, and that's what we went through last week. Okay, so I hope it gave you at least some understanding of what Tal is. I can tell you it greatly enhanced my notion of Tal when you study it, and because it's like all these piyutim. The piyutim are very beautiful, but they take a little bit of work, and there is a reason they were put in our Siddurim. And of course, the assumption most people throughout most of history didn't really understand what it meant, what they were saying, and we know most Jews were. I don't want to say most Jews were ignorant, but it's true. We are the most learned generation probably in Jewish history, or at least from the time of Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Don't let anybody tell you anything differently. The idea I've said many times, the idea that there's Daf Yomi is beyond belief. Talmud, I've said many times, the rabbis in the Talmud would not have spoken the way they did if they thought that regular people were learning the Talmud, because sometimes they say things, your hair stands on edge, the way they sometimes insult each other. But it's insulting with fun. You know that when you're best friend, you can insult. but when you read it as an outsider, oh my gosh. And the Talmud, and also the way they everything about them was never meant, and it's cryptic style. It's not. It's hard to understand because who's going to read this stuff? Only great scholars. We are the most learned generation. Wide. Wide Jewish education. The idea everybody goes to yeshiva in Israel and the Orthodox community. I mean, this is unheard of. This is unheard of 50 years ago. I mean, the last 50 years, 2 years in yeshiva, women learning Talmud. It's unbelievable. The amount of knowledge that we have today of that learned people is unheard of. But still, the Siddur is often a closed book for many, especially things you say once a year. Okay, now if somebody can find it, I could not find it online. I don't know why Sefaria in its liturgy does not have this. I want to say Ya Eli. I want to do that's the bracha, the piyut that we say before Musaf on Shalosh Regalim. So if you have a Siddur, you can look. There are not so many words, so we'll do it sort of al peh. But if you have a Siddur, in any Siddur, it's printed right before Musaf. And you asked Marty, when do we say this? So it says in the RCA Siddur that this was the first time it appears in print was in 1717. That's the first time, 18th century. And it has Kabbalistic overtones. And I imagine it appeared in 1717. Many people weren't saying it. Just that's now today. I don't know if it's universal. It could be some people don't say it. I don't know. The custom is generally not to say it on Yisker, which is interesting. They generally don't say Yaeli on Yisker. And that's it's interesting why they seem to say because it's full of joy and happiness. In other words, it doesn't go with Yisker. We discussed in other years Yisker doesn't go with Yontif. Yisker is a contradiction to Yontif. But nonetheless, we have contradictions, and we want you to live with So later in minhag, it doesn't really belong. But the idea of Yisker is to entice us to do tshuva. Yontif is a day of judgment, right? Not just Rosh Hashanah, but we're judged on wheat, on Pesach. So we're supposed to do a form of tshuva and all the Yom Tovim. So the custom developed to say Yisker, and he mentioned, I think last week even. That's why some people have the custom that when they're in their first year of mourning, they don't actually say Yisker because it's too intense, it'll make them too sad. The loss is too fresh, and that's not good for Yontif. It's not good. Really, Yisker isn't good for Yontif at all, but okay. Again, we have different issues we're trying to get across, so we have to balance, so we allow Yisker. But Ya Eli and Yisker don't go together, so the custom, as far as I know, is that you don't say it in Yisker. Let me know if anybody has in their show. I don't think there's anything wrong. It's not like prohibited to say it on Yisker. I mean, we say all the other nice things in Musaf, but since this is a later day custom, so I imagine in most shuls that's the custom they follow. Okay, so Ya Eli v'Go Ali. God is my God, and then Ya Eli, right? Here they translate the Lord my God. Okay, different names of God. V'Go Ali, God is my Redeemer. That's very Pesach appropriate. Et yatzva likratecha, I will stand before you. I will come before you. Basically, what this is, it's three short paragraphs, which half of it are the same words. Is that it's a prayer to return to the temple to offer sacrifices, which of course is what Musaf is, right? Musaf is the prayer to reinstate the sacrifice, which is why the Reform movement did away with Musaf, and the conservative movement shifted the language from the future to the past. And where we say B'shamna selefanecha korban, and we will do B'shamna, as they say Sheshamasu. That's where they did. What they're saying is accurate. It's true. That's historically true, of course. But obviously, the change has a much deeper meaning. And well, again, without getting into the whole, obviously, this prayer Musaf takes the view that we very much yearn for the reestablishment of korbanot, which I don't have to tell you was not necessarily a universally accepted opinion. And there are, Rav Kook, has raised the possibility that in the third temple there will not be animal sacrifices. Okay, we don't have to get into all theology of this, but and we know, But the Rambam, who has the most sort of negative attitude, we're starting Sefer Vayikra, of course, this week. So the Rambam, who has a much more negative attitude or historical attitude that ideally sacrifices are not something we want. We only needed it because it was too difficult to go from slavery to philosophically talking about God or even to prayer. Prayer is higher than sacrifices. So everybody did sacrifice in the ancient world. It was impossible to have a religious experience without sacrifice. The Torah allowed it begrudgingly. And they said, okay, bring only in the temple and only this and only that and all kinds of rules. But that's not the ideal. And I don't have to tell you this opinion was not everybody danced for joy with this opinion. They, can count all the reasons they burned the book of the Rambam, like this reason, that reason, that was among the things they didn't like. Okay, no, they didn't like it. But even the Rambam, writes in the Yad HaChazaka and the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam writes all the laws of sacrifices. So the Rambam assumes, I think, unless there's some other reading in the Rambam, but the Rambam is assuming that in the third temple we will, of course, bring animal sacrifices. And that's, of course, what the Korban Musaf is the Tfilah Musaf is praying for. And this especially, I want to stand before you. That means I want to stand before you in the temple. The temple is where the presence of God is most felt. The temple is God's home, and that's where so that's how we begin. We're about to daven Musaf. We say this before Ashrei, but we're about to daven Musaf. We want to stand before God. I'm sorry. He was and he will be. He was and he is, right? As the Yud Kei Vav Kei stands for that. God's name is He was, He is, He will be. The Yud Kei Vav, that's what it stands for. So God is above time. That's also the idea that this expresses. Hayah means God is above time, and the temple time ran on a different cylinder. Time was different in the temple. We mentioned a number of times the day in the temple started in the morning, not at night. When you brought a sacrifice, you did it for one day. The one day started at sunrise and ended at sunset, not like we have from sunset, like from sunrise to sunrise in temple. We have our days from sunset to sunset. Mentioned because the temple is all light, it's God's presence, so the day begins and light. And outside of the temple, the world is a dark place. And so the day begins at night. Our mission is to bring Vayhi Or. Our mission is to be like God. Like we imitate God, we're God's brothers. So the same way God created light, we have to create light in the dark world. But time works on a totally different area in the temple. And that's probably why the laws of Shabbos don't apply in the temple. They brought on Shabbos, Korban Musaf, we brought extra sacrifices on Shabbat. Well, how can they violate Shabbat in the temple? Because Shabbat is bringing God's presence into the world. Well, the temple, God's presence, that's it. That's like it's Shabbos on steroids in the temple. It's constantly Shabbat. So therefore, there's no need to observe Shabbat. I mean, the question is, right, we all know we derive the laws of Shabbat from the construction of the Mishkan. But, if we went a step further, we'd say we don't have to keep Shabbat because in the Mishkan, they didn't keep Shabbat. So obviously we don't do that. That's only because the Mishkan is the special place of God. So this idea, God is above time. I mean, and we're connected to the temple. Kol goyei admatecha. All the nations of the world will come. We've mentioned many times the temple is the place for it's a house of prayer for all people in the world. So we begin Musaf with the idea that we yearn to the day to stand in the temple, not just to stand in the temple and be in the presence of this eternal God, history and the future, but we're together with Kol Goyei nation. I found it fascinating. I don't know why they did this exactly. But I noticed in the art scroll, I don't have the art scroll in front of me now, I have a Koran in front of me. But in the art scroll Siddur, somebody, if you have it open, they translate Kol Goyim as going to refer to the Jewish people only. Right, Susan?
Yeah, I have the art scroll in front of me, but it's singular, Kol Goy. It's not Kol Goy. The word is Kol Goy. If you look at it, it's called Goy.
Yeah, so maybe that's why I still think it
Never
means
heard it called
nations
Goye.
of the world.
Never heard it
I
called
still think it means, and that's how Koran translated, the land of every nation. I think this standard translation, Kol Goye Aretz, means all the nations of the world.
It doesn't
I
say
don't, I find that I think Art Scroll is the outlier here, but it
it
is
doesn't say
interesting that
Goye.
Art Scroll. I'm
It doesn't
sorry.
say it doesn't say Goye. The word is Goy. If you look at it, I've
No,
never
I
seen.
understand what you're saying. I just don't think that matters so much. But maybe my Hebrew and all the other Siddurim I looked at did translate it as nations of the world. ArtScroll was I didn't look at 10 Siddurim, I looked at 4 or 5. Every one of them translated as a nation of the world. Just and when I saw it in ArtScroll, I said, "Well, that's really interesting," because there was an idea that the Jews are the goy, and that was they translated it differently. But anyways, okay, and okay, you know what? It's 10:32. I got to go teach in a couple minutes. Let's review. We'll pick up on this next week, and hopefully I'll be able to find it somewhere I can show. Basically, we say the pasuk from next week. Next week, it's good to pick up because it'll be actually Parshat Tzav. The verse that we quote. That's a pasuk from Parshat Tzav that we'll say next week. So that pasuk, except for the first word, which we'll talk about, that pasuk comes from next week's parsha. But the korbanot, that's what Musaf is. Okay, just let's quickly review a little bit what we spoke about. We finished up the bracha Abtal, we're God's friend. We refer to God in our ocean as God is our Dod. That's a notion called Odidofek, and of course the symmetry of Tal and to flourishing and to growth and to peace, and of course to Avram Avinu. Okay, that we saw a little bit later on, but everything should be blessed. It should be answer our nation's desire that the economy should go well, and that's what keeps people all together. I express my inner thoughts to God, and of the lachtot, happiness, joy, not just the joy of people, but like I say, the hills are alive with the sound of music. That nature itself is joy. It's a very Jewish idea. I don't think Julie Andrews was Jewish, of course, but I really didn't think of that before. But of course, there is something very much, and we know Hasidic Rabbi used to go into nature. I think that was common more, they used to go at the beauty of nature. That's how we recognize God. That's how the Rambam writes. And we dance and the Skud of Avram, Tal, we say the bracha before Avram, before Magen Avraham, that Avram is the one who is compared to Tal. He was what gave sustenance to the Jewish people and how the earth itself yearns for it. And then we just started this bracha of Yaeli, praying for the ability or the desire to stand in the temple. And of course, the temple is what brings the Jewish people all together. Sacrifice is just one aspect of the temple. But of course, the temple is the meeting place for all Jews in the world. Okay, is there a commenter here? Rennet is an example. Yes, very good. Rennet is an example of davar hamamit, right? In cheese. That's right. It's not batal. Very good, right? We talked about mamit. Great. If you make a shekel and wine, okay, that we discussed. Yobi nun sebirchan amazon on full meal. Yeah, that's exactly what I mentioned. That's that he would do that because we eat differently. Saying Mashiv Morid HaGeshem is not universal, or you mean Morid Hatal, I assume.
Sorry to tell. I'm sorry.
Right. Is not universal volunteers. Okay. Yeah, obviously, nothing is ever universal. That's can't get the Jewish people to do universal anything, right? And which is good. The shame parts of fame shonot the same way their faces are different. The dotem shonot their views are different. That's the Gemara says in praise. The Jewish people, we don't think alike. I'll just end with one thing. I said, Mitzrayim, we're talking about Egypt. So the word Mitzrayim means narrow, tsar, right? And how does God introduce us to the land of Israel? Eretz Tova Urechava, the good white land. And anybody who knows, we all know that's ridiculous. It's the exact opposite. Egypt is very wide, Israel is very narrow. Obviously, it's not talking geographically. Egypt is constricting. It's dictatorship. It's slavery. People have no freedom. It's Iran, right? You can't. There's no freedom. You're constricted. Israel is rechava, a broad land. We welcome debate. We welcome different opinions. So that's the difference between Mitzrayim and Eretz HaTova Rechava. I think a nice message. We come to Pesach where we have to welcome our 4 children, even children who are not following in the path of Torah need to be invited to the Seder and made to feel welcome. But okay, we'll talk about Pesach, moving forward. So, okay, we look forward to seeing everybody and your friends on Sunday morning, 9:15. And I mentioned we'll send it out 7 speaker. We added the 8th speaker. Dr. Benny will give the shir at the end, Ivrit. So I have 1 shir Ivrit on the Gada, just add it to the end at 2:10. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We look forward to learning with you. All the best. We should hear good news. Tova, how are you doing?
Well, I had a siren in the middle of your class, so I had to run into another.
Even in Efrat. Okay.
Yeah.
Ariel and Rachel got home last night.
Yes, I heard they got home, but I'm not schlepping to 3 countries, so yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm not schlepping through 3 countries
Well,
to
at
get
least they
home.
didn't have
So.
good at Tava and then to Turkey.
Well,
That's
that for sure.
traveling to. No, my kids, miraculously, whatever. 2 of my kids got home from Israel last night. So it was come for Pesach. Their flight got canceled and they put them last minute. They had 4 hours notice, a flight to Geneva and then to Frankfurt and then on to Toronto. But anyways, Bark, they were sleeping yeah.
Okay.
All right, we should hear good news wherever we are. The redemption of Shabbat Tova for everybody. Okay.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.